Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening and a warm welcome to you all at the Embassy of Italy. My name is Dante Brandi. I'm the ambassador of Italy to Singapore and Brunei. And I do thank you all for being here this evening. A few housekeeping information before proceeding. This event is on the record. Its content, including pictures, will be showcased in our online channels, both the website and our social media, while an edited version of the whole conversation recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and broadcasted by Bloomberg in its platform as soon as ready. The whole conversation will last, I hope, 1 hour, including these preliminary remarks and a final segment of Q&A. That said, it gives me a particular pleasure to open the series Made in Italy, Shaping the World here in Singapore. The concept of this series of conversations with Italian business leaders aims at multifold targets. Italy and Singapore share very close economic bonds. Cross-border bilateral investments are contributing to the respective growth, employment, and innovation, while bilateral trade increases also thanks to the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement. We can do more. We can always do more, but especially these days, against the headwinds of geopolitical tensions, of raising costs, of global challenges like climate change, of urgent needs to strike the right balance between opportunities and risks when it comes to disruptive innovations as artificial intelligence, stronger economic ties among like-minded and complementary economies are needed more than ever. As Embassy of Italy, we posed ourselves the question on how to help. And I have the honor to represent a country pretty well known for its lifestyle, but probably less known for being the second largest manufacturing economy in Europe, the 5th in the world, a champion in circular economy, an undisputed leader in many domains, from industrial machinery to pharma, from space technologies to food and food processing technologies. The answer is all there. Let us showcase these less known aspects of Italy and how it could represent a valuable economic partner for Singapore. Let us enable our Italian vibrant private sector to be exposed to the vibrant economic and financial ecosystem of Singapore. This is the reason which gathers us all here tonight, and this is the reason we imagine and shape this series, for which I have to thank Bloomberg Singapore and its vital support. It is an even greater pleasure to open this series with a conversation between Manfredi Catella, CEO and founder of COIMA, and Katrina Nicholas, Deputy Managing Editor of the Global Business Team here at Bloomberg, whom I thank both for their availability. Manfredi Catella is founder and CEO of COIMA, a specialist in investment, development, and management of Italian real estate assets, focused on delivering an ESG impact. He is also president of the Riccardo Catella Foundation, which aims to promote the culture of responsible and sustainable territorial development. The group has just celebrated its 50th anniversary and is now a trustee manager on behalf of leading sovereign wealth funds, including from Asia, and institutional investors from all over the world. Among its most important projects, COIMA has co-invested, co-developed, and still manages Porta Nuova in Milan, the first district in the world to achieve both the LEED for cities and community and the WELL community sustainability certifications. COIMA and Manfredi Catella are then a great part of the recent growth of Milan, one of the most dynamic cities in Europe, and surely consolidating its vibrancy and its capacity to influence and attract capital, talents, culture, innovation, and also important international events like the Winter Olympics in 2026, along with Cortina d'Ampezzo. This conversation would not be possible without the amazing support and contribution of Bloomberg Singapore, and in particular of Katrina Nicholas. Katrina serves as Deputy Managing Editor of the Global Business Team, where she leads the Asia Transport Division. Based in Singapore, she oversees comprehensive business coverage across Asia, with a particular focus on transport, including electric vehicles and airlines. Since joining Bloomberg in 2009, Katrina has held various roles across different offices, including Hong Kong, Beijing, and Dubai. Previously, she managed investment and real estate coverage in Asia and served as an editor for Bloomberg Opinion. Additionally, she has led corporate finance coverage from Bloomberg News in the region. And prior to her tenure at Bloomberg, Katrina gained experience at esteemed media outlets such as the Australian Financial Review, the Sydney Morning Herald, and the Nine Network in Sydney. Again, many thanks to Manfredi and to Katrina and to all of you for kicking off this series with such a surely stimulating and interesting conversation, and enjoying with me a short clip which will bring us to the core of our discussion tonight. Enjoy.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and welcome. So I just wanted to start off perhaps with a reflection to the slideshow that we just saw, this amazing development in Milan, which has obviously been instrumental in changing the face of the city. Perhaps you could start by telling the audience, what impact this has had and, what the urban regeneration has been in terms of this project.
First of all, thank you very much to the Italian ambassador for this invitation, for Bloomberg to host this conversation, Katrina and all of you to take the time to stay with us. So hopefully I will give you some inspiration for a conversation. So happy to get any questions or comments that you think might be interesting. At the end, the purpose of this meeting is for you to find interest in Italy. So really happy to open up as you like. So maybe to use Porta Nuova to answer the question and as a proxy of what's going on in the country, you have to imagine Italy post-war until the end of the 90s, where cities have not experienced urban regeneration, transformation, new products. It has been rather a deterioration of the quality of buildings in the country. So this is not the Italy that maybe you all know when you visit Italy and you see historical monuments and so on. So in 2000, there was kind of a depressed situation in Italy from a city perspective, both Milan and Rome, particularly Milan. And this is one of the very first railway regeneration. This was a railway yard which was being dismissed and basically regenerated, as you quickly saw, into a new neighborhood. And at the beginning of this project, obviously, there was a lot of controversy, because architecture coming back to the city, change in the city after decades of poor quality is obviously not immediately welcomed, because because you have to regain the trust back. But this project has been very important in the inflection, not just for Milan but for Italy, because as we were discussing before, that if you take a measure which is investment in a country, particularly in real estate, before this project there was virtually no foreign capital in Italy. After this project, not just this project, but there are other projects that happen in Milan and in Italy at the same time. But just for simplifying the conversation, the capital, the foreign capital in Italy increased significantly from all over the world, so from United States, Middle East, Asia, as well as other countries in Europe. And on average, we now have 12 billion investments and transactions in Italy, which particularly is Milan and Rome, truly, after basically starting this trend at completion of this project. So it certainly had a role in reliability of the country and a benchmark to become a more palatable and investable market, and this has consolidated over time.
And of course, Porta Nuova is just one of the significant investments that COIMA has in Milan. What are some of the other key development areas there for the company?
We invest and develop all over the country. As you saw from this project, the peculiarity of this project is being a mixed-use neighborhood scale. So when you approach a development of this kind, obviously you have to take into account not just the single building, but all the, you have to have an approach which is more holistic, because you take into account all the infrastructure, the public transportation, the public spaces, so all is within the building, not just the building, and how the different uses interact among each other. So you really have to think about the city as a whole and the community that will ultimately use that part of the city, which is not just who lives or work there, but obviously who visit the place as well. So this approach is something that we learn by doing. That has been the first project that we were doing of the scale, and not only we develop it, but we are operating it. So operating a neighborhood brings a completely different set of skills and requirements, because you are not building, you are managing a space. Basically, you're managing a large neighborhood. So this approach we have replicated. So we're now doing another neighborhood in Milan, which is Porta Romana, is a joint venture with Prada, the fashion company. So Prada in Milan has a very relevant cultural foundation, Prada Foundation, which is basically a contemporary art campus, and they are now our partner into the redevelopment of a neighborhood which is just in front of this cultural campus. Similar approach with the first Italian Bank of Italy, the largest Italian banks of Italy, where we are developing 1 million square meters, basically a small city, I would say, on a relative basis, and we are considering similar projects in Rome as well.
So zooming out, if I can, just for a minute, and perhaps talking a little bit about Italy as an investment destination. You know, when investors are thinking about Europe, they're often thinking of France or perhaps Germany. What, you know, has Italy got at the moment that is particularly attractive for investors from this part of the world?
Well, I think Italy is probably changing its position into the map. Certainly what we're discussing right now is specifically the dynamic of Milan. Milan was not in the allocation of global investors 10 years ago, and today it is in the global allocation of the most important sovereign funds all over the world, just as invest on behalf of some of the most important sovereign funds in Middle East, in Canada, as well as in Asia, as the ambassador was kindly reminding. And what is happening in this moment in Europe is that, as you know, there are big changes. Now, one obviously is related to Brexit, so United Kingdom not being part of Europe anymore, or continental Europe, certainly EU. And the other dynamic that had taken shape after COVID is the geopolitical implication that each of the European country had in these last 3 years, and I'm referring to the core Europe, so Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. And certainly what is happening is that while in the past Germany and France in the risk profile of investable market were perceived as less risky, today probably Italy is getting much more homogeneous to Germany and France. In a way, this is driven also by specific dynamic. I'm referring to Germany economy in particular, but certainly also by merit of Italy. The current government is a government that proved to be a solid political body, well established with international relationship with the United States and the rest of the world. So Italy is emerging as a much more solid country than before, and therefore the risk profile of Italy is reducing, as you can see from one indicator, which is the spread between BTP and Bund, which today gone under 150 basis points. So in a way, the point is there is more value to exploit in Italy with a very stable government and with a risk profile that reduce on a relative basis to other core countries in Europe.
When Meloni came to power in October 2022, I guess her party's origins might have suggested a more isolationist approach, but that has actually, in turn, not been the case. You know, there's been a lot of rhetoric that's been pro-Europe, pro-the US. If we see a Trump presidency, another Trump presidency at the end of this year, how do you think that will colour investors' perceptions of investing in Italy and also change perhaps Italy's relationships with the United States?
This is too big of a question for me to answer. Let me be politically correct. Let me say in a softer way. I think that the most important thing for me is not necessarily who's going to be the president, is how Italy position, how the Italian government position vis-a-vis of the rest of the world. So not all of you probably follow Italy so closely, so let me maybe add a few words about when the Meloni government take position after the election. The expectation were quite uncertain about the position that the government would have taken vis-a-vis of America and vis-a-vis of Russia and Ukraine in terms of conflict which were going on and is going on, unfortunately, in Europe. So the government has proven to be very solid from this perspective, has established and continue to establish what Mr. Draghi said also before, the Prime Minister before Meloni, vis-a-vis of the United States, as well as the position of Italy comparing to geopolitics in terms of the conflict going on, and ultimately gain high reliability from the rest of the world. So to me this is more important than the election in America, not to underestimate the implication, but in a way probably, while at least I believe that when we analyze how to invest in the world in this moment, suddenly my brain is split in three clusters. There is one cluster that is what's going to be fundamentally the fundamental trends that we have in front of us, and those are super important because at the end, if there are structural trends, those will be there to stay, and if you invest in those trends, you will ultimately create value. There is a second cluster which is more, so maybe let me say two words more just not to be generic. In the first cluster, I mean, before the ambassador was speaking about artificial intelligence, I don't think anyone of us in this room believes that this is not going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to imply significant displacement of value, and if you invest correctly, you will have ultimately benefit. I doubt that someone in this room will say that people will go and live in the countryside rather than in cities. During COVID, there has been, I don't know here, but in Italy, there was this mood about, no, because of COVID, all of us will live in the periphery or whatever, in the village or in the countryside, which has not happened. No? So after COVID, everybody is in the city and so on. So I think there are these are structural trends. So if you get the structural trends right and you are disciplined in investing in structural trends, you will ultimately do well, because in the long term, no, you will succeed. Then you have the more contingent, the financial situation. The financial situation is interest rates have gone up, there is less financing, less debt in the market, there will be more demand for liquidity and for recapitalization. That will trigger opportunities. There will be discount in the market, so in terms of timing of investing, now certainly from this year's onward, now we will have a window of investing which will be very good timing. And that's a fact. So it's probably a good time to invest. Normally I believe that if you believe in the fundamentals, now you don't really want to pick the exact best timing to invest. Maybe if you wait another 6 months, you're going to have another little discount and so on, but it's not going to be that will ultimately drive your performance over the long term of the investment. Then there is a third one, which instead is probably the big question mark that none of us, at least I cannot comment, which is geopolitics. What's going on in the world we experienced the uncertainty of these last 3 years, and certainly in front of us we're not going to have real clarity. No, there will be complexity with America, with Asia, with the role of Europe, so Middle East and so on. So I think that unfortunately is going to be the uncertain factors that we will have to take into account as probably there no matter what.
One area, arguably, though, where investors can have some certainty in Europe is particularly around ESG regulations, where there has been, quite a lot of restrictions that have been laid out versus America, certainly. But in a way, this has served to limit speculation, particularly in the commercial real estate sector. Can you comment on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as part of structural trends, meaning people living in cities, and cities ultimately being the most important infrastructure in the globe, at the end, cities will have the biggest opportunities and the biggest problems. Now, some of the biggest problems are pollution, because if you take cities in terms of buildings and transportation, it's basically 70% of the emission of the world. So the big issue is there, and then obviously you have other issues such as social disparity and so on. So, but if we stick with the environmental, which is the question, so the question is ESG, so it's also social, but let's stay for a moment on the environmental. It's clearly that the only way to address the problem of emission is to act at city level in great part, and that obviously is building and transportation fundamentally, and how you plug in the energy, which means obviously what kind of energy you have, it's renewable or not. So that is obviously a big, I don't have to add any word, no, all of us knows. What Europe has done is certainly a very strong commitment, top down, because the European Union has established a plan which is basically the green transition that the European Union is very clearly setting, and also defining very strong discipline. From one side there is the stick and the carrots. Now the stick here is all the consequences that you will have in Europe if, for example, you have buildings that doesn't respect the parameters of emission and consumption, which can go up to not being able to lease. So these are like big sticks, and this will happen. So it's not going to be long term. We're talking about 5 to 10 years, and 5 to 10 years is almost not even a cycle. So it's going to be very short term. And the other one, the carrots, is, for example, the extraordinary public funding the European Union has granted post-COVID to help each country in Europe to transition from an environmental, digital, and social perspective. And Italy actually, from this perspective, has had the lion's share of this extraordinary financing because Italy has received 200 billion from European Union to finance the transition, of which 120 billion have been already funded by European Union. So obviously this is real, and then obviously it needs to be invested in project and infrastructural level and so on.
And I think I was reading today, or perhaps it was just yesterday, a 6.3 billion euro package that was announced by Italy's government, specifically around that green and technology transition, and offering, companies tax breaks of up to, I think it was, at least, or tax breaks if they were pledging to cut emissions by at least 3%. In terms of COIMA, like how directly can that impact your business and your company?
Well, we have, maybe we've been lucky because as I was describing, having had the experience of working at project with urban scale, we kind of had to incorporate sustainability since the very beginning because we were taking care about infrastructure, about transportation. We built a part of underground station, even underground line underneath, a park that we manage, which has become, just last week, has been awarded one of the best public spaces in the world, comparable to I-Line and so on. So maybe we have been lucky because the project that we followed and we are following impose us to be more sensitive in a way to sustainability in general, from one side. From the other, we have always been focusing being a best in class, or trying to be a best in class on a global basis, not on a country specific, which put us on the road to go and speak to the best investors in the world. And this has imposed as a discipline, because obviously when you speak with the big sovereign funds, that by definition are those that have most knowledge and information, will be the one that impose any managers, like we are, to be best in practice. So, people like, Cambridge, Caisse de Dépôt de Québec, or other investors that are certainly advanced on sustainability, have become very close partners to us on this, and we had a mutual exchange of expertise and methodology. So all our funds now are Article 8 or Article 9, according to the basically green legislation of Europe. Our development fund that achieved more than almost $1 billion is one of the 30 global sector leaders now from GRESB. So I would say both formally, but maybe let me just make a soft comment, because to me the truth of sustainability is that you don't kill a person because there is a law that tells you that you don't kill. No, you don't kill because you don't think it's right. So at the end, sustainability is about values, and I think our society needs to recover sustainability from a cultural perspective before than a rules perspective. Anyway, you need the rules, so good to have them.
That's probably a nice segue to talk about some of the investment opportunities that the company has open at the moment. I understand you've got your third opportunity fund currently available to investors, and I think I was reading that was targeting 500 million euro with a close by 2024, and the capability to invest about double that with a targeted return over a 10-year period of about 14%. Correct me on any of that if that's not right, but where are you in terms of raising that fund, and what sort of investment opportunities do you see there?
Thank you for introducing it. This is kind of like a bit of an advertising timing. But yes, we have several strategies in this moment that we are we have activated or we are about activating. One large investment program is related to neighborhood scale, so development, and that has achieved almost $1 billion, and it's primarily like project like the one that we were describing, so mixed use in residential, living, student housing, and so on. The one that you were describing, which I cannot describe better, so you did it already, so I don't have to add anything, but we did the first closing at the end of the year with an Asian, actually with a Singaporean fund, and that we're moving forward in raising for 2024, and then we have a number of other vehicles, but in the respect of the audience and not having a long spot, I finish here.
Okay, right, fair enough. One of the other things we were talking about earlier was affordable housing, and how sometimes you can address the issue of affordable housing by actually investing in infrastructure, which is a sort of a unique way of looking at it, or I found that interesting at least. Perhaps you could elaborate on that a little bit and how the company is actually putting that into practice.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is a very specific idea. Maybe it's applicable elsewhere in the world, but certainly probably a two-level idea. If you take Milan, just as a city, Milan obviously has an underground network, and at the end of each line, like anywhere in the world, I think, you have like big parking area because people get to the underground, get the underground, and then commute. So normally the area around the underground last stations are owned by the public. So the possibility of creating a mixed-use neighborhood at the end of the underground is one way to create mixed use, not just affordable, but I would say mixed, but maybe more green neighborhood in the peripheral area. Another one, a second level, which is related to infrastructure normally, and this is obviously certainly applicable to Italy, certainly applicable to other countries, but not always. But more and more it could be because of infrastructure. Italy is a nation of cities, so we have lots of small cities. So what is happening in this moment in Italy is that people are moving to fewer cities, larger cities, like anywhere in the world. So this is happening, and Milan demographics is going up, but on the other side, other cities have demographics going down. So the result is that you take, for example, Genova. Genova is a city that is 2 hours drive from Milan on the sea. Maybe someone for sure, because I see some Italians, but say someone non-Italians knows Portofino. So Portofino is a great place, which is very close to Genova. So just to understand the quality of the place, and it's 2 hours from Milan. With high-speed train, Genova is 40 minutes. So, and today there are 40,000 homes in Genova that are empty. And if you want to buy a house in Genova, it costs 3,000 euro per square meters. If you want to buy a house in Milano, it's 15,000 euro per square meters if you stay in the center. So don't invest in building homes, just put a high-speed train, and it's very sustainable. You don't have to build new houses, you just reuse what exists. And this is true in the case of Italy, in the case of Milan. I would say in case of Italy because it's true for Rome, for other cities and so on. But in the case of Milan, to remain with the proxy, you have Torino, you have Brescia, you have Bologna. Now Bologna and Torino, as we know, are already connected with high-speed train, and Torino is 40 minutes from Milano. If you live in London, I don't know, in Singapore maybe it's the same. But Singapore maybe is more efficient. But in London, if you want to go from one side to the other, you take 1 hour. So everything is relative. So maybe these are other ways to think about how to address affordability without wasting.
What about when it comes to residential real estate opportunities, particularly in Italy? We were talking again about how households there typically have quite low levels of debt, and yet there's also been an enormous influx of high net worth individuals into the country, and that's surely got to be presenting some pretty interesting residential real estate opportunities.
Yeah, well, residential is certainly an important opportunity, let's say, all over the world, because as I think everybody knows in this room, one of the preferred asset class by investors globally, in this whatever few years, is actually residential and logistic. So residential being certainly one of them. Why? Because there is a change, a shift in residential, because there is a migration towards cities. So cities have a lack of homes. So structural trends are similar in different regions in the world. As far as Italy specifically, the gap is very significant. So there is a big gap between supply and demand in terms of residential. There is a fundamental historical discontinuity in the customers, because Italians, up to my generation, really like to buy the house. And in fact, if you see homeowners in Italy are roughly almost 90%, so way above the average of European Union. But new generation are not looking for buying homes, but rather for rent, not differently from many other parts of the world. So, but if you take institutional ownership of rental building, so residential building for rent in Italy is 5%. Europe average is 30%. So you can see how big is the gap about building buildings for rent, professionally managed and institutionally owned. So this is like a big gap that we have in the living sector, as well as in the student housing. You take Milan. Milan has a population of 1.4 million. Students population is 200,000, so it's a big percentage. Managed beds, so student housing it covers only 5,000 beds. So there is basically no managed beds in Milan, which means that students has to rent maybe a room from a family at a very high price and in a very inefficient space. Again, this is an opportunity because it's a product that is fundamentally missed.
Perhaps that's a good opportunity to open it up to any questions from the room. I'm sure there must be some out there, so please fire away. Perhaps back there?
Italy is implemented a fairly attractive and interesting tax regime for inbound high net worth, where I believe in summary, and if anyone's a tax advisor, please advise me if I'm not wrong, that I believe you can cap your personal income tax at €100,000, irrespective of the amount of capital you bring in into Italy, and you get a dispensation for a period of time that maybe 10 years, maybe slightly longer. Do you think that that's had a net positive impact on the real estate development scene? There was some reference in the question to the influx of high net worth, but you were talking about, I'm a Brit, so we are obsessed with levelling up. You were talking about high-speed rail as a methodology of getting people to access real estate that's affordable, but still be able to work in major connotations. What's the reflection from Italians on these kind of tax regimes and the international people that bring in? Because the context here, in Singapore, there's been an influx of outside wealth, particularly from one region, and that hasn't perhaps been so positively received in some quarters. I just wonder what Italy's take on really importing wealth into people.
You know this very well. So are you coming to live in Milan or in Italy? But it's a very good question. Just for the sake of everybody, the Italian government introduced a tax break that was mentioned. So 100,000 flat tax, no matter what you earn, and this has had as a consequence that 2,000 residents, new residents, came and live in Milan in the high net worth individual segment. So the question, if I understood correctly, is what is the implication for those that stay, the Italians, right? The affordability.
Well, it's threefold. What's the implication for developers such as yourself? What's the implication economically? And then what's the perception for normal working Italians? Do they like it, or do they feel like it's
I think there is a lot of, let me respond precisely. Yes, there are 2,000 people that bought homes, and these people comes from London, comes from Paris, comes from maybe Singapore or New York and so on, and they can afford to pay up to 25, 30,000 euro per square meters, which is a price unseen in Milan. So the prime in Milan is 15,000 euro, just use the number to simplify, basically double. Okay? So you get these people that have a spending power which is significantly higher, and obviously that raised the price significantly. But these are residents that want their homes in 4 streets in Milan. So it doesn't really affect the market overall, because we're talking about the luxury segment of the city. So I believe that it's only positive, this inflow of population, more for the reputation of the city internationally, because obviously these people bring networks and bring companies and bring a capacity to invest, rather than negative. And I believe there is a little, on the Italian side, ideology, how do you say? Ideology? No, about what is the implication on others, because I don't think there is implication. The implication is more general, because like when you do urban regeneration in a city for several time and the price increases, and then it becomes less affordable. But the problem is because it has not been produced enough houses for everybody to keep the affordability of the city. So there has been an imbalance which is not related to the tax break, it's related to the overall dynamic. As far as developers, it's easy. We bought a few buildings in the very center of Milan, and we're going to sell it double than we thought. So, to be honest, that's as simple as this.
Is there any other questions? I'll give you a little bit of time to think of some more, but I have one around the opportunities that you're seeing in Rome, because we've spent a lot of time talking about Milan, which of course you've got a lot of properties there, but and Rome is a very different city. Obviously a lot of historical elements there that can't be disrupted, which must be a limit to development. So what sort of opportunities does the company see in Rome?
Thank you for asking, because Rome is important for sure at this point in time, because Milan, all what we have said about Milan started in 2000. So now we are 2023, and in parallel, with all due respect for my other cities, being in Italian, actually my capital, Rome has been lagging behind and has a delay at least of 23 years on Milan. So that is, as a matter of fact. Delay from an investing perspective could be an opportunity. So if you look at Rome in this moment, certainly there is a consciousness about how relevant urban regeneration can be for the economy of a city. So there is a full commitment from the municipality, as well as from, I would say, the government. Having been the Italian government in Rome, there is obviously a sensitivity about the physical infrastructure where the government obviously is. So there is a full push to make Rome starting a transition, which is very positive. There is a pricing of Rome which is very bottoming, because if you analyze the price of Rome, it's gone down, 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 down. So actually it's very good timing to invest in Rome. Keep it in mind that most of the investments, I think, in real estate globally will be development, because you have to transition. When you say transition, no matter what, it means that you have to go from A to B. You have to make a building more performing. You have to make a neighborhood a better neighborhood. So at the end, there is the transformation component in investing in real estate looking forward. And when you transform into historical cities, obviously you have more complexity, because of archaeology, because of historical authority, and so on. So you have a few layers that Rome has certainly evident, more relevant than Milan, but this doesn't mean that cannot be done.
Any other questions for the room? Up there?
I wanted to find out that what is the stress factor situation in Italy as well?
So I can see that you are considering investing in Italy. There is no distress yet, but I would more emphasize the yet rather than the not. Meaning, as we all know, and this is what I'm saying, I think is not Italian, it's global, there will be less debt, and the debt has become more expensive. So at the timing of refinancing, there will be issues for the owners, the landlord, in many situations. So ultimately, you will have distress situations, or at least need of liquidity, and therefore who has the cash can basically get preferred equity structure or buy a discount. It will happen in Italy as well.
I think we've probably got time for a couple more questions. So if there are any other burning questions out there, one here.
Yes, sorry. I would like to know about what is specific about ESG. It's such a common term. What is specific about the ESG methodology about your company, COIMA, that makes it unique, that could maybe translate to others in Marseille, Mexico City, or whatever?
That's a big question. I don't know if we have anything unique. No, we are seriously committed. We're genuinely committed. Let me be first soft and then hard. Soft is I'm a strong believer that sustainability is part of the values of the people that you work with. So as an entrepreneur and a CEO, my main challenge is to make sustainability not something driven by technical ability, not driven by must do because you have to comply, but because people really want to do it. And why you do something that is beautiful. I use on purpose a word that is abstract, but at the end, all of us like beautiful things. It could be like a beautiful park, it could be like whatever. And why some beautiful painting, why you want to do something beautiful. And sustainability ultimately is not different. So to me there is the cultural part, which I know it seems abstract, but to me is more important than comply. And that is very difficult. Because in this moment, sustainability is all about technical, regulation and technical, which to me is important, but this is not what makes exceptional things. Then obviously you have to have a method. Methodology for us is certainly technical, and we fundamentally, again, not to be too long, I would say there are two areas of main focus for us. One is very technical, and ultimately there is, when we talk about ESG, there is, call it the two primary dimensions, environmental and social for a moment. Not because governance is not important, but governance is more easy to describe. So I don't think we need to describe that. Environmental is very technical. Environmental at the end, you have to, and I'll try to make some real examples. Environmental is you have a building, you have an engine in the building, and you consume and you make emission. Now, probably two things. One, in this last years, all of us as developers build buildings with lots of layers. So we spend a lot of money into double facade, super engine, let me call it engine to understand, spending a lot of money, producing a lot of materials, ultimately being unsustainable. But the true sustainability, you achieve it if the energy that comes into the building is actually sustainable. So it's more infrastructure than building. So it's not if you make a very resilient building, spending a lot of money, then you are more sustainable. Ultimately, the operating the operating life of the building is the one that will reduce the most your impact. And the operation is primarily driven by how you feed the building with the energy. There is a work that we are just about starting, which is using artificial intelligence in managing the building. Now, because obviously, if you, and it's relatively simple to say, because if you get data from the building, because you put sensors, data goes somewhere, you need to analyze this data, and you have to kind of having input. Ideally, the input are not manual, like a machine that tells you, be careful, something broke, you have to, but it's something that tells you, because this is happening, it's highly probable that something will break, so go before it breaks because it costs less. And at a certain point, for certain things, you can arrive at an automation, directly automation, which ultimately is what artificial intelligence can make. So we're nowhere yet compared to what we're saying. We're pushing the bar into this, and this is one way of doing technical. The other way is that in all our funds, we have developed our own methodology to score the target that we want to achieve for any kind of investments. And this is a very disciplined KPIs and target and weight that ultimately give a scoring that fundamentally make a very, very transparent way for us to work. Like, we invest in that and we want to have scoring 60, which doesn't mean anything obviously in this room, but has a certain, on a scale that we create as a meaning. And then we implemented and we monitor the implementation of the investments and the scoring until the end, and we disclose at the end if we achieve 60 or 50 or 70, and that would continue to do this. These are two ways that we're doing it. There are many others. I'm not mentioning the obvious, like the certification and so on, because to me the certification is pretty obvious, not necessarily makes you innovative.
I think we're probably just coming up to the 1 hour mark, so just let me thank you very, very much for this conversation. I found it fascinating, and I'm sure everyone else has as well, and perhaps I'll hand it back to the ambassador just to close.
Thank you very much.